Where do you think people get stuck when it's action time very clearly? You mentioned overthinking. There's kind of like paralysis analysis. Is there other stuff though? Are there other blockers there for people?
We don't avoid tasks. We avoid how the task makes us feel. If a task feels really boring, we're avoiding the boredom more than we are the task. It's not just, I hate taxes. I hate the feeling of uncertainty or the feeling of overwhelm that comes with doing that thing. We don't want to feel dumb or incompetent. We're going to avoid that. I don't want to do business development. I'm going to do some writing and thinking because that feels better for me. Perfectionism is a big one. Is it good enough? I can't get it off the ground because I can't achieve the perfection. This is part of that mental fitness thing, is knowing those patterns and seeing them extremely clearly in the moment so you can move past them.
You're watching the LeanScaper podcast, where landscapers come to grow. If you want the systems, stories, and strategies to build a lean, mission-driven company that your team loves working for, keep watching. Fyfe, it's so good to have you on the LeanScaper podcast. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, man.
Why do you think so many landscapers feel stuck, even though they're working their asses off?
I think at its simplest, effort isn't the same thing as momentum. And I've been thinking about this a lot over the last kind of 6 months. But often there's just so much like motion and effort, but doesn't always translate into like achieving the goals that we want, like the momentum that we want to be feeling. And there's like a disconnect between the two. And I think what we really want is momentum at the end of the day.
When someone says to you, after the many reps that you've had, like you've worked with so many business owners at this point, like working through this framework, part of which we're going to cover today, helping people like get unstuck, let's say, having had as many reps as you have, when someone tells you, I'm feeling really unmotivated right now, typically what's actually going on underneath?
They can't see progress. Like, and this is like a personal felt experience too. Like when I've been unmotivated, everything seems really hard. I'm looking at where I am and where I want to be, and I'm like, man, there's a big gap there. That feels really unmotivating. And then the times where I'm flying, I'm seeing progress, even if it's incremental. And I see this a lot with clients too. When they're coming in and they're really stuck and down and unmotivated, they're not able to see progress in any kind of meaningful way.
Momentum is energizing. You're never exhausted, no matter how hard you're working, when stuff is happening. When things are moving, you could be blitzing 100 hours a week. You're not going to be tired if things are moving. So when people are exhausted, people are, I think, very confused about this, don't see it very clearly. It's almost never the workload. It's almost always what you said, the lack of progress.
When I look back at the times that I've been the most stuck, I can't see any change happening. And how do we start to create something that allows us to see change in a way that's meaningful, that reinforces ourselves and the work that we're doing, and then it spools up and it just like, it starts to create a life of its own at some point.
Well, why don't we talk about the momentum flywheel that you've kind of like built and use a lot with the people you work with? Just like walk us through the framework, set it up for us, and then I think we'll go into the different nodes of the system and really go through some examples and how this applies to everyday life for a landscaper.
So high level, there's 5 components. It starts with energy. And if you don't have energy, you're not going to get very far. So energy, and which is essentially, do you have the fuel to move and get to where you want to go? And that might be physical energy, but that might also be like mental and emotional energy. People get energy from different sources. And for the record, like the way we're talking about this right now is very much on like a personal level. Like what's my personal flywheel of finding momentum for me personally, but in my work. But I think there's also like different layers to this. There's like a team level as well that we might be able to get into. So do you have the energy? Clarity. So are you really clear on what done looks like? What's the vision for what has to happen in the direction that you're going? Because if you don't know that, you're without a map and compass. So you're just kind of running around in a fog. Alignment. So are you actually set up for success because you're playing to your zone of genius or your strengths as a person. And core values might weave into this as well. Like, are you aligned with the vision because it's aligned with who you are and what's important to you? Action. So you're actually taking action. Are there inputs that you're making to create the vision that you want to have? And that's where a lot of the resistance can show up that we were talking about, the self-sabotage stuff. Like, that's where a lot of people get stuck. And then reinforcement. And reinforcement being, are you actually able to see progress visibly on the actions that you're taking? And how is that progress being reinforced into who you are, and celebrating that?
How should people be using this in their own life? Is this like a diagnostic tool? Is this like a wheel that goes around that sort of helps us understand where we are and where we need to go next? Is it sort of navigational? Because we're going to talk about some ideas, and I really want to anchor this before we do on, like, hey, this is how this applies. This is how you should actually deploy this in the context of your everyday work life and even personal life to some degree.
Some people might not know the concept of a flywheel. So I think it's important just to kind of set that frame of what a flywheel is. And this is popularized by Jim Collins and in the book Good to Great. But the idea is a flywheel is this big, huge, heavy disc or a piece of machinery, whatever you want to use. And in order to have it turn one rotation, it takes an insane amount of energy. There's a lot of energy that you have to put in to get this thing to go around once. And as you push it again, it gets incrementally easier. And at some point, it's kind of spinning on its own. It doesn't take much input, and then it kind of like has a life of its own. So this concept of a flywheel is this kind of
centrifugal force that has some mass behind it. It's really, really hard to get going at first, but eventually it picks up enough speed that the mass times speed becomes momentum, and this thing carries itself a little bit. I'm thinking of like some old like textile machinery or something that's, back in the turn of the century industrial revolution. I'm sure there were flywheels in every factory, and they had some like really important job to do inside that, manufacturing environment or whatever. But that's the idea, right?
Yeah. And I just wanted to like really state that clearly, because I think it's important as a visual of what this is as a model. But even without me having the labels on the model, just that image has been really helpful for clients of like, I'm pushing a flywheel in the business, and this never ending thing that you kind of keep pushing forward, and it's self-reinforcing, and it picks up speed. What's the next kind of push? Because I found a lot of things in the business world and self-development world, it's kind of this stop-start thing. It's like, I'm here at the beginning and I want to be up here. And we think it's going to be some kind of linear journey I'm going to go from X to Y. And this notion of like a very gradual, I'm taking a lot of these little spins toward this one thing, this iterative approach, that's kind of taken the pressure off to get it right the first time.
Well, it's a much more inviting premise. The one that gets used a lot is Sisyphus, the Greek god who's got the boulder at the bottom of the hill, and he's condemned from now until the end of time to push it up to the top of the hill, and then when it gets to the top, it drops to the bottom. And whenever you're in these, like I don't know, you like me have been to 1,000 conferences at this point. I can't tell you how many times I've seen Sisyphus brought up on a slide, and everyone's going, "This is what running a business feels like." I'm like, this is deal. Like, if you're telling me that like this is a bad metaphor, like what? And I get what they're trying to say. It's like, it's difficult and you got to start at the bottom, and but the metaphor breaks apart. This flywheel one is actually much, much, much more accurate to what building a team, building a marketing engine, creating momentum in your community, building a brand that's now recognized, creating a culture that people can kind of like feel tied into. All of these things are a flywheel is a way better metaphor for those than friggin' Sisyphus and his rock, because the thing about the flywheel, it actually does start to reinforce, and these things actually do get easier. It's not just suffering in perpetuity. I'm not saying it's ever, a lead pipe cinch and super easy, but this metaphor works. I'm really glad you made us slow down to get that right, because I want people to understand, even though you're probably feeling stuck right now, if you follow this framework, you put the effort in, it doesn't feel like this forever. It's not Sisyphus's plight, stuck on that mountain forever. You're actually you're spinning something up so that it can spin itself, and it can even spin you when you're not feeling that good and not feeling that motivated. So that's a really important frame for the rest of this combo.
And I'll add too that there's layers to this. Like you can push a flywheel on like a daily cycle. That's like a little feedback loop. What's the flywheel I'm pushing today in the business? And then there's like quarterly ones. And one of the things that I've seen with a lot of clients is early on, their energy might be low. So we're pushing the energy flywheel, and that's very focused on health. And they might spend a little while like really getting some health stuff in order, and their energy goes up. And then all of a sudden that's kind of ticking along, and it's like, sweet, now I have capacity, and now I'm going to focus on my leadership flywheel, how I'm showing up for my team. And then like, so it starts in one area, and you get evidence that you are seeing progress, and that invites you into a different arena because you have more confidence that you can do it somewhere else. So it's not just like, we're very much going to be talking probably around business and like leadership, but I've seen that be a really impactful tool in the health realm because there's so much yo-yo stuff. I start and stop my workouts, but it's like, I'm not going to start and stop my workout. I'm just pushing the flywheel today. What does that look like for today? So I just want to give that frame of reference because that visual has alone just been helpful without even like these components that we're going to talk about next.
But the one thing I wanted to ask you is like, entrepreneurs in my experience are not great judges of their own batteries. So there's a perception that it's much more full than it actually is most of the time. And people don't usually like experience burnout until it's like a face plant. It's not that there's very few like release valves or early signs or early warnings. There might be warnings. They're certainly not listened to in most cases. How can we self-diagnose energy issues earlier?
It's a great question. The number of times I've been on a call with a potential client or a new client, and they're talking about what's going on for them, and I'm like, that kind of sounds like burnout. And they're like, really? And I just want to call out, I think there's, we don't want to acknowledge, we might kind of sense that it's there, but we don't want to acknowledge it because what does that mean? What do I have to change? But some of the things that I've seen and felt are just like how scattered and overwhelmed I am. I think a lot of people interchange like overwhelm. They'll use that term instead of burnout because it's not as loaded. How patient people are with their teams and with their families at home. If you're a lot more reactive than you'd like to be, and you're like, I'm not showing up the way I want, pretty good sign.
Other people notice before you. That
was going to be my
useful cue.
If you have a partner or a spouse, ask them.
Right.
They'll
Right.
probably know. And that was like a pretty big gut punch for me at one point. Andrea looked at me. I was like, "You're not your zesty self. Like you're not zesty. Like I want the old you back." And I was like, "Oh." And I've had a couple other clients say like their wife has called them out. It's like, I want the old you back. Like we've lost you somewhere along the way. And that's often when it gets like pretty severe, but usually family will have signals and be like, something's off. Like you're not quite showing up the way you used to.
So if we're blocked for an energy reason, which a lot of us will be, whether we want to admit it or not, and we probably need the help of a partner to see it in the first place, and we might, reluctantly admit that we do. How do we solve a personal energy crisis? Like let's just give a few steps, a few exercises.
I mean, there's some basics that I'm always checking in on for myself and with clients, like how much sleep are you getting? How much exercise are you doing? What are you eating? Or are you just not eating? Because I know when I'm super stressed, my appetite goes. So I get too anxious and I don't want to eat. So there's just some basics to check in on that realm. And a lot of people aren't sleeping well. A lot of them aren't getting, I found that there's a tipping point around like 4 to 5 hours of good exercise a week. If you can get 4 to 5 hours of good exercise, it's a pretty good signal that you're your mental and physical health will increase, but it also means that you have enough boundaries to get that time for yourself.
I want to talk about clarity next. So this is an interesting one to me because there's something. Okay, let me set it up this way. There's something kind of ironic about like landscapers being unclear about the vision for their business, which is like most of us. To be honest, think about it like this: like most of these businesses are incredibly good at design and scopes of work, and the actual business itself is extremely good at having a definition of done, right? They build a scope of work, they build a design, they create an estimate, they go and execute. Like there is signed contracts. Like it's very, very clear when this project is done and when we get paid and when we move on. I'm not saying it always goes that way. Sometimes things go, come out of left field, but nobody starts a project without a blueprint. But building a business, in my mind, is just a really big project over many, many years. But conceptually, it's the same thing. Why do so many people, so many business owners start projects without start businesses or projects without a clear definition of what done is?
Because it takes time. I think it's my easy answer.
And we'd rather just start.
I think there's like it can feel wasteful to spend that much time thinking and bringing clarity, like to really refine something. It's like, I'll just get started. And I think people that start businesses are doers, especially like in the landscaping space. Like you're a doer, you move stuff forward, you get stuff completed. And there's like a default energy and way of operating that works really well, but it might feel slow. It might feel wasteful or like unproductive to spend that much time to sit down and really like nail down what done looks like and what success looks like. And it can feel kind of weird and uncomfortable to like really have to figure that out. And that question, like I still ask myself that, but the amount of times I've asked somebody like, what do you want? And people are like a deer in headlights. What do you want?
It's shocking how perplexing that question is to people. What happens when people just kind of get on with it, start executing, they begin working hard without an understanding of where the finish line is? In your perspective, like from your body of work, what generally happens? You don't need to name names, but some examples would really help.
Well, you just get lost. You're not. I mean, we're going to talk about alignment, which feeds into this quite a bit, but you end up where you don't want to be, or you end up chasing something that's not what you want. And I think for a lot of people, they have notions of what success looks like or what a great business looks like. And we copy that model and we chase what that person has, which is a great place to start from. Like it gives us an image of what it could look like. But the number of clients that have come to me and said, like, it doesn't feel good. Like I have the business that I thought I want, but it's not what I actually wanted. And spending the time to be clear on what it is that you want and what that looks like, to be able to communicate that to somebody else is a really good test. Because often it's something that just lives with us. And this is like some of the bigger vision stuff. But even as a team leader, you have to communicate what done looks like to the teammate that you're delegating to. And if you can't articulate that really, really well, you're setting them up for failure.
What is the single most effective, what's your favorite, like most approachable, easiest to get your head around, like visioning exercise? There's a ton of tools. There's a ton of frameworks. Lots of them, in my experience, are either way too complex and granular. And I'm like, why are you asking me so many questions? And then other ones are just kind of too fluffy. Have you found, is there a step-by-step process? Is there a format to visioning that you've found people really gravitate towards? Entrepreneurs, small business entrepreneurs in particular, really gravitate towards?
I'll share the two things that come up for me when I hear that. OKRs is a great framework. Objectives and Key Results, which is a book by John Doerr. I think it's called Measure What Matters. Business-wise, I think that's a great kind of framework. It could be a bit too much. the thing that I found most helpful is just guided visualization of what you want things to look like. Like, can you close your eyes and tell me what you want the vision to look like? And guiding yourself through like picturing that in your head and then writing it down. And that sounds like overly simplistic, but being able to picture it in your mind's eye and then write it down. So it's somebody else could read it and be like, I get what you're saying. And we're talking kind of like big picture vision of like, what's the vision of the business? But I think the same could be said for a small project. Like, okay, what does done look like for this project? If it's done and complete, what is the outcome that it looks like? Can I share that with you on a piece of paper?
I've always been a big fan of the painted picture, which is a Cameron Herald thing, and it's a really quick read. It's not a complicated concept, but it's, he says a 5 to 8 page document that describes your business in the present tense in first person language, what your company looks like 3 years from now. And he uses that metaphor all the time. He's like, you get in a DeLorean time machine, you drive into the future, you hop out, and now you're walking around the building. What do you see? And you write it in first person. What's really become interesting about visioning, not to make this too kind of like buzzwordy, but how quickly you can do this with AI now is unbelievable. So here's what, if you are struggling with vision in your business or in your role, here's what you do. You take a notepad and, not on a screen, out for a walk, maybe in nature, write down core areas in your life that really matter. So if you're doing a personal painted picture, which I'd advocate, it's health, wealth, marriage, hobbies, activities, adventures, travel, friendship, spirituality. Like the list goes on. There's probably 12 things. We're not that we aren't complicated creatures. Honestly, it's not a long list. But you get your buckets figured out, and then you just voice type into some LLM the things that you want. You don't even need to write. You just voice type per bucket what you want to have 3 years from now, and ask it to snap it into a written document. I mean, you could get this done in an hour and a half if you were in a focused flow state. You could really do this quickly. And so, I think for me, it's been one of the most profound things I ever did was do that for myself. It really got the dopamine loops going because I understand what the early mornings and late nights are for. I understand what the sacrifice is for. Going back to what you said earlier, seeing progress, I can see little corners of that picture becoming more detailed, right? Like, it's happening. It's still a long way off, but it is happening. And so until I anchored that for myself, it really, the tire spinning analogy was me for sure. And I think a lot of people listening. And so I just would share that painted picture is a great exercise, and what you can do with some modern tools and how quickly you can bring this together is unbelievable.
Yeah, AI has definitely sped that up a lot. And the other thing I would offer too is having a clear vision is a flywheel in of itself. The first time it might not be as clear. Like there's V1. Like, I think there's often a notion that I have to have a super clear vision that's exactly what I want. Otherwise I'm not gonna hit it, or I'm gonna go in the wrong way. So like having a vision that you're gonna revise again and again and again and again, and each time it's gonna get more clear as you go. And that's given me permission to just start, because sometimes I'd procrastinate, like, oh, it's not quite right. Like, it's not quite the vision. Like, what if it's off? And I would overthink it and second guess myself. To just, using it as like, oh, this is V1 of infinite, and I can revise it and I'll make it better.
Let's talk a little bit about alignment. So you kind of you explained this earlier as doing something, play to your strengths. Don't fight yourself. Pick a battle you can win. Put yourself in situations, build strategies, draft roles for yourself, augment systems for yourself so that your true gifting gets to shine, and all of the weaknesses, which, by the way, you probably have more than your gifts, we can kind of hide those away in a closet.
Alignment's really important, because when we're not aligned with if we're not aligned with the vision, it's going to be really tough. So like, if our core values aren't matching with the vision that we've set off, like, you're kind of off to a tough start. But what I see often is we're not playing to those strengths, and that becomes very draining. So if somebody's a really gifted salesperson, they're really extroverted, they like being out there amongst the people, and that's where they get their energy and their unique gifts are, sticking them in front of a desk and doing really detailed spreadsheet work is probably going to kill them, and vice versa. And I think what's tough as a leader is often you're wearing a lot of different hats. So if you're a business owner, you're wearing a lot of them. Leaders are always kind of like, there's lots of different pieces that you're pulling on, and really having the awareness and spending the time to get clear on like your working style and what your zone of genius is allows you to have a lot more flow in the work that you do and find more little pockets of joy in the work, which is, again, speeds up the momentum. Because if you're not, there's a lot of friction, and that can create a big drain, and everything kind of gets out of balance and is all wonky.
Do you see a connection between being out of alignment and heavy duty procrastination, like not getting the work done because, whatever, it doesn't feel like us to some degree? I ask because I feel that question came to me because that is me in a nutshell. If I don't really like the thing, I just punt it. The stuff I really revs me up, I'm just like, get it done immediately.
So it's definitely a big component of procrastination, especially long-term, and looking at how do you outsource or maneuver some of those tasks to somebody else, or set yourself up in your role in a way that's maybe 70-30, 80-20, like 80% of your time is in that zone of genius. Like, man, if you had a team that was all playing to their strengths, you're kind of unstoppable. But as there's more friction, there's more procrastination because it feels really tedious or boring or hard, and then you're not taking the action, which is the next piece.
Let's move to the next piece. If we have some level of alignment, we've designed this in such a way that we can really feel in our power zone. Talk about action, where this fits into the framework, and how we do more of it.
It's really where the rubber hits the road. Like, if you're not taking action on the things you need to do, you're not going to be achieving the vision. Like, nothing's really happening. And that was a trap I was falling into, with a lot of thinking. So I would think I was doing work because I was thinking about it, but actual output towards the things I needed to be doing, what wasn't happening. I think what's tough sometimes is I, anyways, over-index on like, what's the perfect right action that's going to be the most high leverage thing? And then I sit there thinking and not doing anything. So there's a bit of a flywheel with like taking some action, and you get some feedback loop happening of like, oh, maybe I'll try this instead and try that instead. But as much as possible, you want to be playing into like, what is the most important thing? What is that higher leverage action that you need to be taking that's going to move you the closest to the vision that you've set out?
Where do you think people get stuck when it's action time? Very clearly, you mentioned overthinking. There's kind of like paralysis analysis. Is there other stuff though? Are there other blockers there for people?
Just complete avoidance, avoiding hard conversations. That's procrastination too, but like procrastinating on tasks. One thing I would say around that is we don't avoid tasks. We avoid how the task makes us feel. So if a task feels really boring, that we're avoiding the boredom more than we are the task. And it's just been a helpful little like, oh, like that's what I'm avoiding. It's not just, I hate taxes. I hate the feeling of uncertainty or the feeling of overwhelm that comes with doing that thing.
What about tasks that make us feel dumb or incompetent?
We don't want to feel dumb or incompetent. We're going to avoid that.
Yeah.
So there's procrastination and avoidance. For some people, they'll go to distraction instead. So they'll look busy doing something else. So for me, I don't want to do business development. I'm going to do some writing and thinking because that feels better for me. And we all have our strengths and the things that we find more enjoyable. So we switch to that thing. Perfectionism is a big one. Is it good enough? It's not like I can't get it off the ground because I can't achieve the perfection. So this is part of that mental fitness thing, is knowing those patterns and seeing them extremely clearly in the moment so you can move past them.
And then reinforcement is an interesting one. So let's round out this framework and talk a bit about that. Like when you talk about reinforcement, I'm thinking of like high fives and celebrations and we did it. Is that kind of what you mean, or is there more to it?
That's part of it, which sounds all like cheerleadery, but there is a bunch of science to that, which I can talk about in a second. But the bigger thing is you have energy, you have a clear vision, it's an alignment, and you're taking a bunch of action. The part that I see a lot of people miss on is that's where it stops. And there's no active, visible acknowledgement of the progress made. And we started the conversation at the top being like, motivation comes from seeing progress. So how do we slow down just enough to be like, hey, I see the progress that I'm making on these tasks, these actions, health related ones. Like, am I seeing my weight drop, or am I seeing the bench press go up? Man, that's pretty motivating. Let's celebrate that win and be like, okay, sweet. I can bench another 5 pounds this week. Okay, what do we do next week? So there's the act of actually being able to see the progress. There's the act of celebrating when you see the progress, because that gives you a dopamine hit and reinforces you to do it again. And there's a bunch of neuroscience wrapped into that. And then who are you becoming because of that?
I don't think that most of our audience can really see how far they've come, the growth that they've achieved. They don't fully appreciate the progress, and as a result, they probably under celebrate or don't celebrate at all. Part of me thinks is like they're afraid to sound cheerleadery, to use that word again. But do you have a deeper perspective as to why that? Like, why is it that we all kind of tend to do that?
I doubt.
Is it like, hey, like I don't, that's for little kids. I don't need to do that because I'm a big serious business person.
I think there's a couple parts to it. I think there's, if I celebrate, then I've made it. So there's like a foot off the gas thing of like, oh, sweet, we did it. Now I get to stop, which isn't the point. It's, so I think there's a bit of that, like if I give myself that win, that fuel and hunger might go away. And I think that fuel and hunger starts us on our journey, but it won't sustain us long term.
Why is that an unhealthy attitude to have? And give us a scientific answer.
That is very much the saboteur side. That's the flip side of mental fitness. When we are coming from a place of scarcity and we're navigating the challenges through fear, scarcity, anxiety, like those negative emotions, that can only last so long. And that like hunger and drive will sputter out. That's kind of that motivation piece. So just like it becomes a bit of an anti-flywheel where it's like, it's not going to reinforce what you want. It's not the positive reinforcement that's going to spool you up. At some point, it's going to fight you.
So if we're looking at all five of these parts, right? We've talked about energy and why that's important. You need to have clarity, define a finish line. You have alignment so that you're playing to your strengths. You take that and move it into action so that stuff is actually happening. And then you reinforce the wins along the way. And you probably, learn and make some micro adjustments. This is kind of a 5-part. Now that we've unpacked it, do you want to just maybe like bring it in for landing and explain how this ought to be, how people can use this to diagnose where they're at and hopefully like get traction and get the flywheel moving again if they feel stuck on one of these?
Well, I mean, I think that's just it, is like when you look at this, if you were to rate each scale 1 to 10, which one's the lowest? Like what the theory of constraints. Like if your energy is really low, might be a good place to start to get some momentum going. If you have great energy, it's there, but you're feeling lost and unclear about where you're going, spending some time like sharpening that one. So it becomes like, where's the biggest bottleneck in this? Working on that, bringing clarity to it, getting it unstuck, and that creates more flow. And then you're kind of constantly just like iterating on each of these. So it's never done, but each time I've gone through a pass of this, it gets a little bit faster. And there's a little more flow and a little more clarity on each of them. How do I celebrate things and reinforce things better? Oh, I can actually track this thing that's going to allow me to see this win faster. Shorter feedback loop.
You've talked about this idea you brought up again a second ago of like self-sabotage. You use this word saboteurs. It's and you earlier used this idea of like sometimes we put the brakes on this. How do you think about and identify self-sabotage when we're working through this momentum flywheel? If we're starting to build things up, we're starting to feel progress. Do people sometimes consciously or unconsciously like put the brakes on? And if so, why?
I mean, often that sabotage stuff is happening before the momentum's happening. Like that's why we're stuck. That's like the brakes are just on like it's not spinning at all. We're just kind of stuck. We're in the trenches and just lost. And being able to see some of those patterns that are keeping that stuck can be really helpful, because those self-sabotaging patterns might be getting in the way of you having a clear vision. Like to be able to slow down, and that, like you're just moving so fast in your business. You're so like focused on doing. It feels really weird and slow to slow down and develop the vision. And that can be a pattern of self-sabotage, like super restless, go. I can't stop. So like that might get in the way of you having vision. So each of these, the self-sabotaging can impact each little component, but in its essence, we all have these things that get in our own way. It's like, how do we see them for what they are so that we can release the brake and have this start to spin more, which is a lot about mental fitness.
If someone right now is listening to this and they're feeling stuck, they're not feeling any momentum, they really want to feel that way again. They felt it before, they'd like to get back there. What's your singular advice for that person to help get them just out of the jam?
Pick one small place, work, life, wherever it is that you're like, I'm going to commit to pushing this flywheel. Health, fitness, managing your email inbox. Like it doesn't really matter what it is. It could be something big, it could be something small. Ideally, the smaller the feedback loop, the better, so you can actually see progress. But I think like the essence of what this architecture is, or this mechanism does, is it starts to help you create evidence that things are possible. And how do you start to do that on a small scale and see the wins? Because as you said, like often we don't recognize the wins that we've had. And there's so many clients who are like, man, do you remember where you were a year ago? I was talking to a client yesterday. Inside of a year, he lost 50 pounds. He's going to be running a marathon this year. He's taking leadership courses. He's like, his health is insane, like way better. He's like tackling things in the business with so much more speed and addressing things. It's just like, it's crazy what happens in a year. And he was like, man, I couldn't see that. To like pick one spot that you're going to dedicate to for 30 days, 60 days, whatever, and then create a flywheel. I call it a flywheel log. Every day, log the win of what you did to push the flywheel.
And why only one? So someone could say pick three or do a few things at once. You're saying be really narrow in the focus. Why is that important?
Yeah, it loses its impact if you're too spread. Like just pick one area, create the evidence that this works. Like that. I think that's one of my things with all of this has been, there's so many frameworks out there for this. There's so many like magic bullet things that like do this and you'll have whatever. And I'm like, I get it's a bit hypocritical that I'm sharing a system of like what I think works, but you need to prove it to yourself and choose one small area to create evidence that it works. And then you can start to apply it everywhere. And that's what I'm seeing with my clients. And that's what I'm seeing for myself is like, I believe it. The fact that I'm on this podcast with you today is a result of me doing this and following this. And it's like, it's proving itself to me, and that creates evidence of who I'm becoming and who I want to become and what's possible. And it just reinforces itself. So it's like the biggest piece I would share is like, prove to yourself that it works in some small area, and it will just show up, and you'll see that like that looping architecture everywhere.
Get a quick win first. It's like get the first plate spinning, and then when that plate is spinning, the centrifugal force keeps it on your finger. You can then go and get another plate spinning. But if you try to get 8 spinning at once, none of them are spinning. They're all broken on the floor. I think that's like as good a place as any to wrap Fyfe. This has been a really awesome walkthrough of this momentum flywheel. Really quickly, you didn't speak about it. Just tell people a little bit about like the work you do, where people can contact you, where to follow you on LinkedIn or Instagram, or what you're up to online.
Yeah. Fyfe-coaching.com. It's very outdated right now. It's due for a rebrand and like a lot more of this on it. But that's probably the easiest place to hit me up, or on LinkedIn. And yeah, I work a lot with business owners and leaders in the trades, helping them find a lot more momentum. And it's been so much fun.
I really appreciate being here, man. It's been super fun. Thanks for putting this together. Can't wait for everyone to listen to it. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, man.